Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Andrew Bernstein. Andrew was the co-founder of NBA Photos and a primary contributor to NBA Entertainment's global media, spending his career capturing unforgettable moments from the sidelines of NBA Finals, All-Star games, and championship seasons. Known for his deep rapport with athletes, he's photographed legendary players and teams, including Kobe Bryant, with whom he collaborated on the best-selling book, The Mamba Mentality, How I Play. Over 4 decades, he has cemented his place in sports history, earning numerous accolades, including the prestigious Kurt Gowdy Media Award from the Basketball Hall of Fame. Now, as he steps out from behind the lens, Andrew has embraced a new role as a speaker, author, and podcast host. Through his platforms, Legends of Sport, he shares the intimate stories of sports icons with fans worldwide, connecting audiences to the powerful moments and personalities that define sports. With his podcasts, documentaries, and speaking engagements, Andrew is bringing his passion for storytelling to new audiences, inspiring others, and preserving the legacy of sports worldwide. You can find Andrew on Instagram at ADBphotonic or by going to his website, adbapi.com. Hello, Andrew. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Well, Olivia, great to see you. Great to be on your show, and thank you for that monumental intro. That was pretty amazing. Thank you. I didn't
Of
realize I had
course.
done that much in all my career, but it's nice to hear it.
Oh, and I think sometimes we all go through moments in life, and to us, it becomes a routine part of
Yeah.
every day, and we don't realize until someone really highlights it, the amazing things that we've done, when to us it was just part of our everyday life and memories we hold close to us. And
Mhm.
you've definitely done a lot. And I want to start off with the first question I ask every guest, and then we're going to get deep diving into everything and more personable and really talk as we are, and we were talking about this before, that friend connection that we are. But to start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Andrew Bernstein?
Well, success has sort of transformed over the course of my career. So, as a young sports photographer trying to break into the business, success for me was getting an assignment, and getting my name printed on either, a newspaper or a magazine or whatever, so that everyone in the world could see that I took that photo. I mean, that goes back to even high school, seeing my name, and knowing that every kid in the high school saw my name on the byline there on our little high school paper. Um, and then as I became a professional, it sort of ratcheted up to the next level. Success became benchmarks for me. So I'll give you an example. Getting published in Sports Illustrated to me was a benchmark moment that I defined as the next level of success as a young sports photographer. So that happened, I don't know, a year or two into my career. And then the next level after that, of course, is getting the cover of Sports Illustrated, which is the holy grail for sports photographers. And once you kind of get that, you're in there with the big boys, so to speak. They literally cannot take that away from you. Your cover will always be there and part of the pantheon of covers from the greats of sports photography that were my mentors and the people that I looked up to and wanted to emulate. Um, and then concurrently with all that, I was building a business. So I wanted to be successful in business, meaning that I actually made money, and I could, as I started to have kids, I could feed my family and take care of my kids and pay a mortgage and all that stuff. So it sounds a little bit like it's more materialistic, but yet it was very an internal drive to get to the next level and get to the next level and the next level. So that's what success means to me, is never really standing still and sort of basking in whatever's going on in the moment. There's always something else to achieve. And now that I'm retired off the court, I'm still a photographer, but I'm not shooting basketball games on the court. Um, it has a whole other connotation and a whole other meaning because, like you said in the intro, I'm building this platform to be successful. So time will tell on that, but at this point in my life, I could have gone off and gone fishing or played golf, and I don't like doing either of those things, so I might as well keep working.
One thing you brought up in telling us what success means and looks like to you that I think is really important to highlight is the fact that you pivoted your goals. And when I
Mhm.
say pivoted, you expanded upon them. You said, okay, I've now reached this. And instead of becoming stagnant, which so many people do sometimes,
Mhm.
is you said, okay, what's the next thing I can achieve? What's that next thing I could be doing? And I think that goes down the line even further and saying, okay, we could have this really big goal, right? Like you kind of mentioned being in Sports Illustrated and then saying, okay, now I'm going to get the cover and saying when you started, whether you did or not, um, hey, that is the ultimate goal is to get in Sports Illustrated. I have to do that. You
Mhm.
obviously set goals leading up to that. And then once you accomplish that, you said, okay, now the ultimate goal that I've had is done. What's the next thing I could do? And I think that's what really keeps us all moving and changing and adapting and growing is when we have those goals and then say, okay, what's the next thing I can be doing
Mhm.
instead of going, okay, now I'm good. And sometimes we all get to that place, like, let me make it clear. We get to that place where we're like, okay, we're good. And now it's time to ride the wave and just see where this
Mhm.
takes us
Yeah.
because you kind of hit the peak. But there's also times we need to be able to say, okay, what is the next thing I could do? Even if it's not in your career space. For
Mhm.
example, what you did, you said, okay, now I'm done photography and being on the sidelines and doing all this stuff. But now my goals are going to change. Now I'm going to speak. Now I'm going to have my podcast. Now it's going to look different. I'm going to do that next thing. And I think that's really amazing. For you, Andy, you had a front row seat to some of the most iconic moments in sports history, capturing not only the action, but also the emotion and the intensity behind some of those iconic photos we've seen over the years. Looking back, what was the it initially that drew you to sport photography, and how did the passion evolve to over years to what your career and passion ended up becoming?
Well, that's a great question, and both the things you just talked about are sort of all gelled into the same sort of answer. When I was 14, my dad bought me my first camera, and I instantly took to the medium of photography. I never had any interest in photography whatsoever. And, when I grew up, this is like, late 60s, early 70s, a professional photographer was like an exotic profession. It was like nobody really knew any professional photographers. And if you did, they shot bar mitzvahs and weddings. I never really kind of intellectualized like, well, somebody had to take the pictures that are in the New York Post or the New York
Mhm.
Times or in the magazine that my parents got, but I never like could put that together with like a job. So when I saw that I could express myself creatively through the medium of photography and then go into the dark room and develop the film and make the prints and literally, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in a dark room, Olivia, but it's literally like a magic trick. I mean, you're putting a piece of paper into this liquid under a yellow light, and magically, an image comes up that you conceptualize or at least push the shutter button to take. And it was the most amazing feeling ever. It was literally like I was at a magic show. And so that became sort of my dream to be a photographer I wanted to be a sports photographer because I grew up in a very sports conscious house. My dad, my uncles, all crazy Brooklyn Dodger fans. Um, Dodgers moved the year I was born in 1958, which all I heard about was the Brooklyn Dodgers and Ebbets Field and everything, but neither of those existed once I came into the world. But the bonding that I had with my dad was really over sports. My dad had season tickets to the Rangers hockey team for years. I went to almost every game from 9, 10 years old to when I went to college. We went to a bunch of Mets games. I played sports in the street growing up in Brooklyn. I was always the littlest kid, but I always loved to play, pick up, stickball, baseball, football, whatever it was. So, you know, the when I realized that I wanted to be a sports photographer, it seemed like the perfect marriage, quite honestly, because I had a passion for photography, I had a passion for sports. Why not just marry these two together and make it a career, right? So the dream became a goal. And Peter Guber, the great Peter Guber, who owns the Golden State Warriors, he owns the Dodgers. He's become a great mentor of mine. Peter, in his book, which I'm going to plug because everybody that watches your show or tunes into your show should read Peter Guber's book, Tell It to Win, because Peter went literally rags to riches. And he details his entire journey and so many life lessons in there in business. Peter talks about dreams plus goals equals destiny. So being a sports photographer was a dream. I had to, at some point, make it a goal, which meant I got to go to college for it. I have to start assisting. I have to actually be focused on it becoming a career. The goal was to become a successful working sports photographer who actually earned money, that somebody paid me. And now looking back, this is 45, 6 years later. Was it my destiny? I believe it was, because I'm not going to say it was, or it was ordained from above, but there was some force working out there that pushed me and kept pushing me and would not let me. I was relentless in my pursuit of becoming successful. So, the other part B of your question, the answer is I was around a guy named Kobe Bryant for 20 years. And this guy was never satisfied with just being good or great, wanted to be the greatest, right? And to be the greatest, you are never satisfied. And the word Kobe hated the most was the word potential. That, we hear this word all the time. Oh, this athlete has reached his potential, or this student, because I teach a lot, this is their potential. This is their ceiling. Kobe hated that. No, he felt like nobody should have a ceiling, that you should be able to push yourself further than even you think you can go. I mean, the hell with everybody else, but you. And the perfect case in point is Pau Gasol, who came to the Lakers as a great player. I mean, he was one of the greats in the game at that time, but Kobe made him greater. And the reason Pau is in the Hall of Fame and the reason why his jersey is hanging at Crypto.com Arena next to Kobe's is because Kobe was able to take him to the next level and make him realize that he could achieve what even he didn't think was possible. So that's been my motivating force. And the last thing I'll say is I've been completely obsessed with my craft. So just like Kobe, who is as obsessed with his craft, he's a basketball player, I'm a photographer. That's why we became so close, because we shared this passion for what we did. And he was such a great teacher without having to really spell it out. Just watching him every single day, he made me better because he forced me to be better at my job and my craft, because I saw the level that he pushed himself. So I hope that answers the question. But it was, there were a lot of elements in your question there that I wanted to address.
I like giving dynamic questions and seeing where the guest goes. So
Yeah.
definitely you took it and you sparked two different follow-up questions that I have, and I definitely want to cover both.
Mhm.
So I first will cover the one that goes a little bit farther back to the beginning.
Hmm.
and something you said. And then I want to cover the aspect of that relationship with Kobe that
Hmm.
you formed and that take it, because Andy, you and I have talked about this prior, how it really became a friendship and really became something where you guys got to collaborate on so many different aspects
Hmm.
of things.
Right.
But first, what was it like saying, okay, I want to be a sports photographer? And as you mentioned earlier in your answer, that wasn't really a thing. And sometimes we've seen that throughout time where you're really certain individuals are the ones that don't have that lead by example. Oh, hundreds of people are doing this, right? You see it in
Hmm.
the sports world all the time,
Hmm.
especially in professional sports. There aren't that many people who have done certain things before. So you have to create the game card by yourself, right? The
Yep.
maneuvers and all the different aspects. So for you, what was it like trying to build a career and find that path when not having the traditional roles and people going, okay, this is step A, this is step B, expect this, expect that.
Yeah, another great question. I went to the University of Massachusetts as an undergrad, as a communications major. So I I loved photography in high school. I wanted to pursue it in college. I ended up going to UMass, and lo and behold, they don't even have any photography classes. I mean, I probably should have done a little bit of research, but there were a lot of factors why I ended up at UMass. It was close to home, blah blah blah, and it seemed like an attractive place for a photographer, but they didn't have any formalized classes, but they did have we did have a daily newspaper that came out on campus 5 days a week, which I gravitated towards. So I saw how a newsroom worked um, on a daily basis, and I don't know. In the first month of my freshman year, I became the assistant photo editor. I was 17 years old. I looked like I was like 14, honestly, and nobody else wanted the job, and I was basically living in the newsroom. And what was great about it was I was giving out assignments to like juniors and seniors, but of course keeping the plum assignments for myself, you know. So I really learned on the job, but I reached a ceiling where I wasn't learning enough technically. Um, I didn't know how to do lighting. I didn't really know anything about business whatsoever. So I took a leap of faith actually in my junior year. I transferred to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, where from the first day, literally, I was told I was in the wrong place. We don't teach sports photography here. We're a commercial art and design college. We're studio photographers, blah, blah, blah. And, when you tell me that from Brooklyn, that is only going to fuel me even more because I want to not only prove you wrong, but I want to prove to myself that I am in the right place. So what happened there was I had two teachers that believed in me. And this is really important because this is one of the things, later in life now that I understand about being a mentor. And they saw the talent that I had. I didn't have talent in the studio. I was terrible. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't shoot a fashion model. I couldn't shoot product. I was terrible. But they saw the talent that I had in photojournalism, how much I love sports. And these two teachers would not let me fail, honestly. And they would not let me listen to all that noise that was just barrage, constant barrage. And through one of my teachers, Bill Robbins, he introduced me to um, a photographer from Sports Illustrated named Lane Stewart, who's one of their staff guys, who took me in as like fourth assistant on a shoot that he did, and happened to be with the Lakers, which was kind of an interesting coincidence. And through Lane, I met other photographers who then took me out on assignments, shooting games and portraits and everything under the sun. So that was my second education on the job, was working with these guys as their assistant and learning the ins and outs of the job, how to deal with clients. I ended up working from my teacher Bill in his studio and saw how he interacted with clients and how he dealt with vendors and and went with him to the bank and taught all the things that you need to know in business. And then I was getting sort of some quote unquote book training at school. So all of those elements sort of came together, right? And so I did have good mentors and teachers. And as sort of, kept peeling back the onion in sports photography, guys like Neil Leifer and Walter Yost and John Zimmerman and all the really godfathers of sports photography. I learned about them and how they started and what they innovated, and I want to be part of that. I wanted to be the next generation, honestly, of that. And both Neil and Walter have been great friends and mentors for my entire career. I mean, Neil Leifer is literally, if you look at the Mount Rushmore of sports photographers, Neil and Walter and these other guys are right up there. So I was always curious. That's another element that I learned from Kobe. Another sort of pillar of the Mamba mentality that I learned was always be curious about your craft, but don't always be, just limited to your craft. Learn about other people's crafts.
Mhm.
I'll tell you a quick story, okay, about curiosity. So one of the tenets and pillars of the Mamba mentality is curiosity. And Kobe he was famous for picking Michael Jordan's brain like during an All-Star game, right? Or calling people blindly and cold calling like Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey and famous people that he admired, like how great they were, and he wanted to sort of compare notes, like you're great over here and I'm great over here. What's our common denominator, and how can I even get even greater? Which is what we talked about earlier. One of the people he called was the great John Williams, the composer, composed everything from Star Wars to every great movie. Guys won probably 50 Academy Awards. Kobe was a big fan. On his way home from a game, he gets John Williams's cell phone number through all his channels, calls John Williams on the phone, who actually answers the phone. And guy doesn't do a lot of interviews or anything like that. And they have an hour-long conversation. Fast forward, Kobe announces his retirement. He really releases this poem called Dear Basketball. Next thing you know, he's partnering with John Williams and the great animator Glenn Keane. They release the animated short film, Dear Basketball. And what happens? Kobe Bryant wins an Oscar, right? He wins that first professional athlete to ever win an Oscar. And why did that happen? Because he was curious. I mean, so curiosity, we think of curiosity like as a childhood thing, like little kids are curious. We as adults need to constantly be curious, right? Just
Mhm.
like I can sense you're curious about my path, my journey, right? I'm curious about you. I love to learn people's stories, and that's probably the overriding reason why I started the podcast. Because I'm just curious about where everybody started, who helped them, how did they become great, and those lead to great conversations.
And they lead not only to great conversations, but dynamic conversations. And like you said in that example, it also allows you to take away notes. Oh, that was interesting. Oh,
Mhm.
what would it look like in this space? And
Very
I
true.
do that sometimes. I have conversations with different people, and I'm like, how would that look over here? And because I'm involved in so many different things and different spaces, I could kind of take it and go, okay, it might not affect me, but does it affect someone I know? And can I share this information with them to help them?
Mhm.
And I think, as you said, it's a great example of how that story with Kobe on that curiosity and building relationships,
Mhm.
right? And really going, okay, put my preconceived notions aside, right? I look at something this way. I'm not going to take any of my biases, any of my frameworks into this conversation. I want to learn because you're the expert in this area. And why are you doing certain things? I think that's one of the great things that we can all be doing. I try to do it as much as possible. I know in my own space is
Mhm.
I will go to someone and say, explain it to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially if you're in the same industry, people go, "Well, why am I explaining this to you?"
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
because are you going to take something? Are you going to, why do you want to know? But it really comes from an aspect of I want to see what the conversation could be. Why are you doing it? Let me understand, because then that way it's not that you try to do anything that they're doing, but it gives you a different perspective, a different level
Yeah.
to maybe take one small thing and implement it. But as I said as well, it allows you to build relationships. And that Kobe story blatantly demonstrates, in my
Mhm.
eyes, the
Yeah.
power of building relationships as well. Because look what he built over all those years with those individuals to then retire, take a poem he wrote that he worked on to really demonstrate his emotions and his perspective, and tapping on people he looked at as experts in their area and say, hey, can we do this? And it turned into such an impactful thing. For you, as you mentioned Kobe before, and I told you earlier I was going to bring it up, and we were going to circle back to this, and you did it so well.
Uh,
Um, what was it like first introducing to being introduced to Kobe and getting in that space, and then how did you grow that relationship over so many years to it being what it was?
well, I've told this story before, and I don't think I've told it. I didn't think we discussed this when you and I spoke last. But um, so Kobe came into the league. He had just turned 18 years old. You know, he was this highly touted phenom from Philadelphia area that none of us in the West Coast really ever heard of, quite frankly. And he's pretty well known in the East Coast, but the Lakers and Jerry West made a lot of maneuvers to get him in the draft, and they made trades and blah blah blah. So it's Media Day 1996. Which is Kobe's coming out party. Media Day is essentially the first day of training camp where the team puts on their jerseys for the first time and they go out. The first thing they do is go out and meet the media. And this is before they practice or do anything. And it's literally the first day of the season of training camp. And Media Day is a crazy, chaotic scene. And if you can imagine, like the Lakers practice facility, and every square inch of the facility has got a different set, so they're doing radio over here and TV stuff over there and promo stuff over here and photo shoots and blah, blah, blah. And so NBA Photos, who I work for, and the Lakers, we had three different photo stations. And the first one is just a basic headshot. It's like, passport photo, mugshot. That's going to be the photo that TV and everybody uses for the year. And I'm going to shoot that. And, the players just come one after the other. And here comes this young kid. And like any new player that I haven't met before, a traded player, whomever, I'm going to pay them the respect to go in and say hi and introduce myself before I pick up the camera. So I go in the set, and he's there. Backdrop is behind him. And I put my hand down. I say, hey, Kobe, I'm Andy Bernstein. I'm your team photographer. And the kid looks me right in the eye and is shaking my hand. He goes, well, I know who you are, man. And, I'm thinking this is like a smart ass kid that it's like, who says that to somebody? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know how that's possible because we've never met. He goes, yeah, but I had all your posters in my room hanging up when I grew up. Like all your posters were hanging in my room. And I'm thinking, so this is a kid who read the photo credit on a poster, which it's literally microscopic. You need a magnifying glass to read it. And the only people who read photo credits are other photographers who are jealous that they didn't get the poster. So that was the first indicator to me that there's something different about this kid. And he also had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And I, at the time, was 38. He was 18. I remember when I was 18 and I had a chip on my shoulder. I probably still did at 38. And I don't know if I would have been quite as smart as he was at that moment, but there was just a connection there. And he knew who I was also because by that point I'd been in the league for 13 or 14 years, and he's with the Laker organization and very familiar with my history with the Lakers, with Magic and Pat Riley and Showtime and all that because I found out later, incredible student of the game. So earning the trust with him was not that difficult because I was already cemented in with the team. I didn't want to screw that trust up, obviously. So we had a very respectful relationship for the first 2 or 3 years. And he didn't play a lot. He was very frustrated, but I was able to document that early part of his journey. And I was always around. I mean, he always, the big joke between Kobe and I was who would get to the arena first, him or me. And I always won because I needed to be there when he arrived to the arena, you know. So we just forged this fantastic sort of unsaid relationship. Like, why are we why are we friends? And why do I trust you to come into the inner sanctum, of his workouts and all of his private stuff that he did with his family and everything else. And I guess I earned that trust, but he also knew that I was also doing my job and he didn't want anybody else to document him, quite frankly. So when we got to the sort of the end of the road and he announces his retirement, I was like mortified because I knew it was coming. He's in his 20th season, so the guy wasn't going to play forever. But I was mortified because like I was going to lose my favorite subject. I mean, this guy has been in front of my camera for 20 years. So I presented this idea to do a book to him and he and his team, and it was kind of a greatest hits of my photography. And he loved the idea of us doing a book together. He didn't want to do the book I suggested, so it ended up being the Mamba Mentality book because he wanted to tell his story and his definition of what the Mamba Mentality meant to him directly through my photos. So it was so rewarding and humbling, but also gratifying that this is a relationship that I was very proud of on a professional scale, but also on a personal level. And now this was going to be sort of the ultimate kind of legacy, which of course, after we lost him, the book has become his legacy. And it's now printed all over the world in probably 25 different languages. So, that's very, very gratifying to me. I mean, I try to separate myself from the sadness of not having him around, but also that he would want his legacy to continue through our book. So it gives me even more reason to be doing what I'm doing.
And that being said, before we transition to talk about the Legends of Sport
Mhm.
podcast and what you're doing, I want to ask one quick question about, as you mentioned your relationship with Kobe, and you're only one of two, I should say, photographers to receive the Kurt Gowdy Media Award. And between that and collaborating with Kobe Bryant on the Mamba Mentality, which are two amazing achievements, and you've done so much more than those two, but I can't list them all or we could be here all day.
Yeah.
What stands out to you the most about those experiences, especially in terms of the unique challenges and rewards that it has brought you, maybe in the time and long term?
Well, I never in a million years thought that I would be making a speech at the Basketball Hall of Fame. That was never a goal. That, we talked earlier about benchmark. That was never, not even part of the radar screen of any radar screen. Um, I just want to have a successful career as a professional photographer. I just wanted people to remember my photos and have them mean something to them, to elicit a response. That's the core reason I became a photographer, because I want you to look at one of my pictures and react to it in any way, shape, or form at what it means to you. Either you were at the game, or you took your kid, or your dad brought you to the game, or you saw that moment happen on TV, or whatever it was. So that was super gratifying. But that came out of nowhere, the Hall of Fame thing. I got to be honest. When I got the call, I thought it was like a prank. And it was amazing. It was when I was up there making the speech, and it's very nerve-wracking, as you can imagine, because you got to get up in front of like everybody who you've have worked for decades. And the first person I see from the podium is David Stern, like staring right up at me. Um, and I just took a deep breath, and I was so just grateful at that moment, honestly. And I mean, it sounds cliche, but I really I was very calm when I made the speech. I think I surprised my family because I was a nervous wreck before it. Um, because I remembered those early days of being like struggling and hoping the phone would ring and hoping I'd get an assignment and hoping I'd be able to pay the rent and buy some equipment and
Mhm.
buy film, and all that stuff. So all that sort of came like flooding back to me. And then with Kobe, it was a different kind of sort of gratification and appreciation because to be able to document an iconic athlete, first of all, it's unheard of now that any athlete in any sport is going to be with the same team in the same city for 20 years. We'll never see that again, ever, with any team because of free agency and money and all that stuff. But he was committed to being with the Lakers. He had an opportunity a couple of times to leave, and he wanted to be a Laker for life. Um, so to be able to tell his story through my camera, I mean, that's why I got into the business in the first place. So it kind of was a full circle. As the great Bill Jackson would say, we all have these full circle moments in our life and in our careers where you can see where you started, the whole arc of your career and all the experiences, and you're coming right back to the original purpose was to tell a story, to make people happy, to give people some joy from your photos and to have documented this athlete. I mean, who could ask for anything better than that?
And I think just hearing you talk about it and the passion and the impact it seems all of these moments in your life had just demonstrates the power and impact you find in collaborating in the relationships
Mm-hmm.
and being a part of different moments in sports history.
Mm-hmm.
As Andy, as you've now transitioned to sharing stories of athletes from behind the lens
Mm-hmm.
to in front of the ledge with Legends of Sports platform and the podcast especially, how does your role as a storyteller feel different now that you're in front of the mic?
Yeah, I mean, it's mind blowing, but I actually really, really, really like it, and I think I'm pretty good at it. Quite honestly, I tend to be a pretty humble guy, but I took to it really quickly because of my like insatiable curiosity. So the whole podcast idea was born out of a show that I pitched to the Lakers. Oh, this is kind of probably 12 years and 13 years ago, called Through the Lens, which is actually a TV show on the Lakers cable network, where I would sit down with a Laker personality on camera and talk about their career through my photos. So, it could be James Worthy, Jeannie Buss, Gary Vitti, Phil Jackson. So we did about a dozen or so episodes. And a very, very good friend of mine named Norm Pattis approached me pregame of a Laker game. And he calls me over and he's a very fast talking guy. He goes, Andy, I love this show you're doing. You're talking to all these different Laker people. He goes, I want to put that show on my podcast network. And think this is like 9 years ago. And I look at him, I said, Norm, I love you, man, and thank you for liking my show, but I don't know what a podcast is. I mean, this is the infancy of podcasting. I said, it's like radio or something. And he goes, yeah, it's kind of like radio, but you talk a lot more. And I said, but Norm, again, I love you and thank you for the offer, but this is a visual show. We're showing photos, and I don't know if I can use a bad word on your show,
You
but
can. You're good.
and we're talking about the photos and the person's reaction. He goes, Andy, nobody gives a shit about the photos, okay? They want to know the story. They want to see the photos. They'll go to your website, they'll go to your Instagram, but the story is what's important. I said, okay. And I went in, we hammered out this idea, and he had been helping me with this germ of a concept of legends of sport for a couple of years. Norm had been sort of mentoring me on that. And he says, look, let's call it Legends of Sport. You've been looking for a vehicle to kind of launch the platform. Let it be the podcast. I'm like, okay. So that was 8 years ago and going strong in season 7. We took about almost a year off, 9 months, a year off after COVID. And we're deep into season 7 now, 240 or 50 episodes. And to answer your question, I just love it. I just love getting everybody's story, just like probably speaking to the choir here, but I love the research part of it. I love learning about somebody before I even talk to them, and then being able to formulate with my producer, a line of questioning, and then the reactions we get on our social media and our YouTube. I mean, it's like it's so nobody makes a lot of money in podcasting. That's how I got into it. I mean, it's not really why I got into sports photography either. Um, but I love what I'm doing, and I have the passion for it, the same passion, just in a different way that I did when I was an active photographer.
And I will say that you hit on a few points there where I'm like, yep. And one of them being, for me, I love podcasting. As you said, you get to hear people's stories, you get to connect with them. But it's also, as I know, because we've talked about this before, it's about
Mhm.
building those relationships
Mhm.
and those friendships. And I can't count the amount of people that I've either come across who listen to the show or like you, where we meet, we talk, then you end up being on the show where you become friends. And
Yeah.
there's that level of like, I understand where you've been and like you
Hmm.
can't really copy it. And I say, based on also your answer, it made me think of the fact that, like professional sports, podcasting is similar in the essence of, well, a few things, but one of which being everyone thinks you're going to make all this money. The amount of times when I worked in professional sports, people thought I was making millions of dollars or hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands of dollars. And I was like, that's what the athletes get.
Yeah, those are
That
the
is
guys
not,
actually wearing the uniforms. Like
yeah.
they're making the
I'm
money.
like, that's
We're
nowhere
helping them make the money.
right. Hoping because a lot of them don't even get to that point.
Right.
If you're on practice squads or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
and there's that disconnect of people thinking, "Oh, that's the perception." It's so famed up.
Hmm.
Everyone just expects anyone in that circle. But what I have found is in professional sports, that's also like podcasting, because in podcasting, everyone thinks you're probably making a lot of money and if you're going to be one of the top podcasters, you're making all this money from your podcast. No, there's other avenues you could use to end up making money and it gives you a voice and credibility and all this stuff. But people don't understand as the industry has grown, the amount of money that platforms like Spotify, iTunes, things like that just hand out money, YouTube, it
Yeah.
has gone way down.
Yeah.
And same and then the other analogy you made me think of between sports and podcasting is this aspect of we all are just here. We found our voice, we get to
Hmm.
connect. But in sports, so many times there's so much work that gets done behind the scenes and intention and honing that craft and doing research and to get better and strategy of again watching game film. What are you going to do? What do you do in this situation? How do you pivot? And a
Hmm.
lot of that goes into like you said throughout this conversation as well, honing your craft. And podcasting, you need to hone your craft as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I think it's a given, having, had a couple of conversations with you already, that there's no chance in hell that you would wing it, right? You would never just start a podcast with somebody that you haven't researched, you haven't done your homework, you weren't prepared for. So that says a lot about you as a professional, but it also speaks to your drive and your passion. And I'm the same way. I wouldn't want to put the guest in that situation either. Like, I love coming out of left field with some questions that the guest sometimes looks at me like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. That's kind of cool, right? So,
I I
um,
I love those moments
yeah,
because especially as you know, interviewing so many professional athletes, former professional athletes like you do on your show, they're used to interviews. They're
yeah.
used to questions. They kind of know how it goes. They're expecting some form of something. So when you can come out of it with something I love the moments, especially with the celebrities and current or former pro athletes, where I get them on and
Mhm.
they've been interviewed hundreds and thousands of times. And
Yeah.
they're like, no one's ever thought to ask me that question. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, why? Because it seems so like interesting and
Yeah.
something we would all want to know. Why
Right.
didn't this get asked? But it's like you said, you and I do the research on it.
Mhm.
You and I have conversations and build those relationships before we even sit down to have conversations with our guests, which
Yeah.
allows us different insights and knowledge that if you just, as you said, just sit down and kind of wing it, you're not going to even scratch the surface to some of the most fascinating aspects of an individual.
Yeah, for sure. And I also want to get back to the reason, the purpose of what we do, right? So I don't know how much you've thought about this, but you're actually providing a service to the listening and viewing public out there. You might not realize that, and I don't know how much you've thought about that. Legends of Sport was really born out of being of service. I was around so many events, mostly NBA events, but also other sports, and of course, very in tune with the athletes who are making a lot of money, which are the current ones, and the ones from the past who didn't really make any money and were really struggling. And some of, the Allen Iverson kind of Mike Tyson types who made a lot of money and pissed away all that money. Um, and my partners and I, two very good friends of mine in the sports business as well, we just felt like we had to help these athletes, these former players, male and female, who didn't make the big money, who the spotlight now has moved somewhere else. Um, and I'll tell you a very quick story. I was in Europe at an NBA event. I think it was in Munich or somewhere. And the NBA brings out these legends to like wave to the public at halftime or whatever it is. And I'm assembled with all the other photographers at center court, and they're going to bring out these 8 or 10 legends. And they're bringing out these guys. Bill Russell comes out and waves, and Dominique Wilkins, and I think Larry Bird was there, whatever. And they bring out, then the next guy out, this literally happened, is Dr. J, right? And then the guy says, and the great Dr. J, Julius Irving. And a journalist taps me on the shoulder. He goes, what is he a doctor of? Right? And I'm like, this is Dr. freaking J. I mean, what are you talking about? Was he a doctor of? And that coupled with every horror story we've all read about, so many of these former athletes being destitute, and not just the athletes. I mean, think about teams. I'll just give you one example. I was a 69 Mets fan growing up. That was my team. I was 11 years old when they won the World Series, the greatest thing that ever happened in my neighborhood. And I knew every player on the team and had every baseball card and everything. Well, I don't think there's any person on the planet other than somebody like me who could name probably 5 people who are on the 69 Mets now. And some of them have passed away. Even the Mets don't even have a 69 Mets sort of tab on their website. So we wanted to celebrate those guys. Everybody knows the Magic and Kareems and all those, but what about like the role players and the guys down at the bench who were on those Showtime teams? And I got to experience that up close and personal. We had Pat Riley and Magic put together a Showtime reunion that any player who won a ring during the 80s, when they won 5 championships, were invited to this great reunion in Maui, which I was invited to as well. And these guys are like, they're struggling. I mean, they
Mhm.
can't support themselves. Their wives have to take 2 jobs. They're living with their kids, whatever the hell it is. And, my heart goes out to those guys. So being of service is one of the greatest things we can do. And by you educating your listening public on what success means and how to get there, I don't know if we haven't had this deep of a conversation, but I don't know if you've gone that far in your own self to realize, wow, I'm really like helping people here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, when I started the podcast, which when that was an idea, between the time it was an idea and launching the podcast 2 months later, I ended up forming my business.
Hmm.
But it came off the fact of when I worked in professional sports, I was that person who kind of like you asking all the questions. Let me utilize all the resources I have to learn everything, connect the dots, leverage my knowledge, and really understand all these facets.
Mhm.
And so that drove me to be able to work in professional sports. But
Mhm.
I during that time, I became very close friends with the players, not only because I was working with them, but because I was the one going, hey, did you think about this? What if your career ends tomorrow? Are we prepping for these things?
Yeah.
What can you be thinking about? So, A, it motivates them, but also if something happens tomorrow, they are less likely to dive into that depression. So, we
Mhm.
were having some of those conversations, not because anyone at the New York Giants told me to, or
Mhm.
any, when I would meet these guys, they told me to. It was because I was honestly curious and trying to inform them of like, hey, start thinking about this. Like, let's start coming up with plans. And
Mhm.
then when I ended up going and deciding to leave professional sports and going into supply chain, I was a young individual working in a role that most people worked many, many years to get.
Mhm.
And I started by overseeing the production of every helicopter we made around the world. And
Mhm.
so I would talk to individuals and I'd be like, well, have you thought about joining this professional society or doing this so that
Mhm.
you can meet the goals you're talking about right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
personally and professionally? And they look at me like a deer in headlights. Like no one has ever mentioned that to them. What am I talking about? What are the benefits?
Mhm.
So, and I saw that when I went on to also be a professor at a university talking about career development.
Mhm.
Everyone thought, okay, I'm going to graduate college. I'm going to make those six figures. And I'm like, hold up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you walk out of my class actually thinking this is realistic.
Right.
Like, those are outliers.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to graduate with no experience and make six figures, like, again, outlier.
Yeah.
So that's why I started this podcast. It was let's bring those stories to light of what is realistic journeys. They
Mhm.
can change. So if you're going, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, you're
Mhm.
not alone. We've
Yeah.
all been there. I joke I've had six professional careers in my life easily.
Yeah.
Um, but all of that, like you said earlier, has given me this arc to have a voice, able to leverage that voice to have these conversations, but also give me the knowledge and experiences to connect it to different people,
Yeah.
but also be able to help them outside of the show. Okay, is the knowledge in podcasting and doing podcast consulting? Is it the second business that I just launched where it's helping the coast, members of the US Coast Guard and their family members with just being able to wear different apparel, represent what their country and what they do every day to give
Mhm.
back to our country.
Yeah.
And I solely started that because I saw a gap and I had the knowledge. And I think that's what we all need to see sometimes is like you might not know the effect today of doing what you're doing, and you might not know the effect 5 years from now, but you're making that impact. And what's the impact you want to make? And
Yeah.
there's so much more you and I could go into all this, but I know we are at the top
Yeah.
and all of that. So, Andrew, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Well, best way is yeah, everybody, I guess, does Instagram. So the best way is to follow us. So when I say us, it's myself. My Instagram is at ADB Photo Inc. And then our Legends of Sport Instagram is at Legends of Sport, no S at the end, at Legends of Sport. And then our YouTube, which we're really trying to build, that's our big kind of push for the end of the year and into the next year. Please subscribe because we're posting all of our interviews are on video and audio. So our YouTube is Legends of Sport, and of course the podcast it's Legends of Sport on every platform. We're hosted by iHeart, but we're on every platform, so you can go back and see all the interviews we've done over the years and I think we started doing video pretty much regularly during COVID when we were all stuck in the house. But I have some early video with Kobe, with Magic, with a few other people, so it's definitely worth watching. And we're putting out reels and all that stuff. I have two really great social media people, and my producer is constantly kind of, educating me on what needs to get done. So we're taking the podcast on the road to various events. We were just at the Hall of Fame. We did 25 interviews in less than 48 hours there, which is amazing. And hopefully bringing it, I think, to NBA All-Star Weekend in February and a few other places. So the social media is really the best place to go.
Well, thank you, Andy, for all of your insight today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. It'll be really great connecting with you. I'm going to plug one more thing, if you don't mind, which has been a really important book for me to read now that and you used the word very early in our conversation today, use the word pivot, and then you use the word transition. And I like both of those words because I don't like the word retired. Retired means I'm like out playing golf somewhere. I've pivoted to doing something, and there's nothing against golf. I don't play it, but those guys who do at my age, but I can't stop, working and trying to do what I like to do. So this book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain, for any of your listeners who are in like a career change situation, pivoting, looking to change direction in life. David talks about the first mountain being achieving and attaining and everything we do to build up our business and our life and all the materialistic things and all that stuff. But then the second mountain is what do we do with all that? And that's really about giving back. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. So I feel like I'm starting to scale that second mountain a little bit. And stay tuned because I think there's a lot more to come from Legends of Sport. So I hope we can have a follow-up down the road at some point.
And I'm excited to personally watch this second mountain, as you say, and scaling that and your journey through that, because I full-heartedly always think there's always that second, third mountain. There's always something else we can be doing to grow and make an impact in the world. A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation are dreams plus goals equal destiny. As Andy brought up earlier, his dream was to be a sports photographer. His goal was to go to college, to be successful in that and grow those skills. And that ended up being his destiny and getting to make such an impact at sports and capturing those moments and memories and building relationships, as well as understand the resources around you. A pure example, which I love because I full-heartedly believe we need to understand that we can learn things in untraditional manners. Andy so did this. When he got to school, he realized he was not going to get all the tools he needed for his toolbox from a traditional classroom. There was obviously benefits to it, but he needed to do more. So he decided to go and start being a part of the UMass newspaper. He started getting different mentors. He went on and really took the time to get jobs, to mentor, to see different aspects, to give him different perspectives and knowledge and level up those experiences. As well as an adult, we are able and we should be curious. As Andy mentioned earlier, curiosity is the thing that helps fuel him, makes him better, makes him learn more. Same with Kobe, and it is so important to always be asking questions and being willing to have those conversations and dive in and really understand people's perspectives and be able to walk away with tidbits of that, whether you can implement it today in your life or you never know when you might be able to. So this was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Andrew Bernstein. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.